Hello and welcome. This is On the Mic with Mike. I am Mike Jarvis, and I'm joined this time by the one and only Mr. Desmond Meade, who is the president, I should say, of the organization now being increasingly popularly known as MACG. That's what it is. It's the Montserrat Access Group called MACG. And we've been hearing a lot about MACG, and should I say a lot from MACG regarding the ongoing discussion about access, that very much used, all-embracing term. Access meaning transportation into and out of Montserrat by sea or by air, but in regarding MACG, principally by air. Desmond, welcome. Great to have you on board.
Thanks for inviting me, Mike, to your program. Mike on the mic. I like that introduction. Yes, I'm glad
And
to be here.
a very nice play on words there. I said, "Welcome on
Yes,
board." You know, there's an
yeah,
there's an
yeah, exactly.
aeronautical to
Yeah,
it as well.
aeronautical and aviation
Yeah,
and marine as well, because
exactly,
it's
exactly. There,
always
there you
something that
go.
the captain
Uh,
always says. Yeah, the captain always says, "Welcome on board,
well, there you go. There you
passengers.
go.
Your destination is."
Good. Well, yeah, that's an interesting one. The
Yeah,
destination is,
the
and that's what we're going to
destination
try
is.
to work
Yes,
out. We know where we
correct.
want to go, right? And
Yes,
this discussion is
agreed.
about how do we get there. Let us begin by you telling us about MACG, Desmond, because I am actually fascinated by the level of Montserratian and Montserrat-linked expertise, particularly aviation expertise in this organization.
Yes, Mike. It's a very interesting developments that occurred, and it was a matter of necessity. It came out of necessity. During the pandemic, I arranged, or I was approached by, I will call her name, Dr. Ingrid Buffon. We were actually on a flight going to Antigua in October, and she said, "Desmond, we have to do something about this. This access." So this was 2020, and we said we have to do something about this. And I said, "Yes, Ingrid, let me see what I can work out. Let me see what I can work out with Winier. I can talk to Winier. I have contacts with Winier, and let me see what I can do." And Winier responded favorably to coming in and doing charters, especially at the time we could not transit Antigua if you were non-vaccinated. So we know we had a significant amount of people who wanted to travel to Montserrat out of the UK particularly, and we went to great lengths to um, research the flights and the connections out of the UK to St. Martin, which was key. The issue was as similar to what we have to deal with in Antigua. It required an overnight. You either had to overnight in Antigua, sorry, in St. Martin, or you had to overnight in Schiphol in Amsterdam. But we looked at the schedules. I researched the schedules. I saw what flights were available. You could have left London early in the morning at 6:30 London time, and at 3 p.m. St. Martin time, you were on the ground in St. Martin. However, St. Martin is a busy hub, and it's very difficult sometimes to get out that same afternoon. So most of our passengers had to overnight in St. Martin, spend the night. But that was all arranged, Mike. I arranged everything for the passengers, and there was not one complaint from any passenger. They were glad to have the opportunity to be able to connect to Montserrat seamlessly. Transportation was arranged, the hotel was arranged, the check-in was arranged for Winier. So when the passengers got off the plane in St. Martin, I had a taxi waiting to pick them up, take them to the hotel. And in the morning, the reciprocal happened. The same taxi picked them up, took them all to the airport. And by 8 o'clock that morning, those passengers were in Montserrat. So that was the backdrop from where MACG started. This was
So
during the
if I
time.
may interject here, Desmond, I'll,
Yeah,
pardon me, do this from time to time. But
that's
is
fine.
that suggesting that what we now know as MACG, this organization of aviation experts, actually started out of a sort of an emergency uh, flight booking venture, so to speak?
Yes, yes, it was. Yes, it was because I mean, I from the moment I started talking to Dr. Buffon, and she got to the UK because she was doing her locums in the UK, and she started spreading the word. I immediately started getting phone calls immediately because people had to come home for Christmas, people had to come home for family reunions, people had to come home for family emergencies, and there were people who needed to travel because of medical emergencies. So once that happened, it just rolling now. Bearing in mind, I did all of this manually by myself with my computer and my phone, manually inputting all of this information to facilitate this travel with Winair, signing contracts with Winair to ensure, and this was not done for profit. Let me state that off the bat. This was not done for profit. This was just to get people to and from Montserrat. And the same thing was true. I had passengers who had to go back up to the UK, and the same thing happened. We got them back to St. Martin, and they continued. Once they got back to St. Martin, that morning, the next morning, they were in the UK, safe, comfortable, and happy that we were able to, well, at that time, myself was able to facilitate this emergency travel, as you put it. It was an emergency. It was an emergency, especially during COVID.
So I take it then, if I recall that period, all of this happened before we started hearing a lot about this visa restriction that effectively shortened the landing strip.
That is true. That is true.
Tell us about that.
So just to fast forward before we go to that, Mike, the after we got through that winter of I did four charters in and out of Montserrat, the winter of 21. Um, I was approached by four members in the UK, potential members at the time. They said, Desmond, we have to do something about this. And I said to I said to the members, or the folks, Mr. Franklin Williams, Sister Lillian Thomas, Alvin Gerald, and Roland Willock. I said to them, we cannot do this unless we have a structure. We have to have a legal entity to push forward our case. We cannot do this as individuals because unless you have a legal business entity behind your name, typically things fall on deaf ears. And we agreed. We sat down. We had our initial meetings in April of 2022, and in September of 22, we had our first elections, and those members, those names that I just called, except Mr. Williams, we were elected as the first board, and we became Montserrat Access Group 2022 officially. So that is where MACG started.
And what time
And
did the visa issue come up?
the visa issue started, it's raised its ugly head in October, coincidentally, 1 month after we established what we were going to do as a group, which was a public statement. We introduced the idea that we were going to contact Winair to do flights for us for the winter. It was just a matter of advertising the group, advertising the routes, advertising the schedule. And I think it was on the 21st of October, if my memory serves me correctly, the first letter came out, which was an ASI publication showing that there was a limitation on the number of passengers to go into Montserrat or come out to Montserrat based on this quote unquote RISA.
Okay, let me play a devil's advocate. I'm no conspiracy theorist, but I am certain, I'm 100% certain that there might be someone listening who will say, hang on a minute, let's look at the timeline, the time when your organization announced its intention to get going, and the time that the ASI announcement was made
Yes, very,
public, or
very,
the
very.
ASI. I mean, I don't have any evidence to prove anything, but I'm just
No,
saying anyone looking at it would say, hang on a minute, is there a link? There might not be a link, but
it's coincidental,
dot, dot,
very
dot.
coincidental.
Very coincidental.
Yeah. So I will follow that up by stating, after we published our list, I started getting calls for booking charters, but I had not gotten a formal agreement with Winnie at the time, which was about the second week into November. I hadn't got an agreement with Winnie at the time to do a charter, and I was getting charters for that same week into Montserrat. There was a family that needed to travel to Montserrat, and I was making arrangements to get them to St. Martin. But I said, no, I still have not got a firm commitment from Winnie, because Winnie had to do the assessment of their planning for the upcoming season. When I got the confirmation from Winnie, I posted a schedule of flights into Montserrat starting on the 4th of December, 2022. And that continued all the way through April of 2023. So we were looking at a set of 26 charters to start from December 4th, every other week coming into Montserrat.
And that in itself appears to me to be a not just a good business opportunity, but utilizing the Twin Otter opens an avenue for even increased travel, ease of travel into and out of Montserrat. And then you were basically hit with this ASI directive. But wasn't that ASI directive already in motion before all of this came up? Was it,
I,
or
I
was it
can
not?
I cannot say that specifically. What I would say is that once that initial ASI letter came out, I dismissed it as it was a non-binding letter. I had discussions with Minister Sammy about it. I had discussions with the Premier Farrell about it, and they said no, this document is null and void. There's no signature. Um, there's no teeth to it. It was just a name, a logo, and there was no date, Mike. That document had no date. How can a legitimate business organization that is responsible for the regulation of safety, for the regulation of training, for the regulation of air operations, for the certification of an airport, how could they distribute a letter without an effective date? That is irresponsible on the part of ASI. However that letter came out, they can always say, no, that didn't come from us. No, it was just a study. And that is what they claim. It was just a study. But no, even a document, when you go into university or you are in grade school, you must have a date for handing in your homework.
Certainly.
So the premise that ASI distributed an undated document should negate any discussion that ASI is going to bring to the table, unless it's duly signed by an officer with an appropriate date and to whom that letter was addressed. There was no address. There was no give this to the minister, give this to the air traffic control, give this to all operators. It should be distributed through the normal stakeholders. Even the chief of immigration in Montserrat should have a
So,
letter, should have a copy of that letter.
so how did that document, undated, get into circulation, or who did it go to? regarding the decision then that was made to give power and effect to that document, which has resulted in the, I call it the effective shortening of the runway, because it restricts particularly, I think, the takeoff weight of a Twin Otter 19-seater Twin Otter aircraft, which effectively makes it uncommercial to operate a Twin Otter into Montserrat. So how did that decision, that what appears to be a binding decision, come about that apparently applies to Montserrat, but for example, even though say a Sabre is a Dutch territory, it doesn't apply there, even though the Sabre airport, the airstrip is shorter than that of Montserrat, using the same Twin Otters. I don't get it.
Okay, so let us address the latter first. Sabre is a Dutch regulated territory, so their regulations, although in most instances regulations from all the major certifying agencies in the world, they follow in step with each other, because all of these international countries have bilateral agreements whereby, especially if they are category 1 countries, they have ease of access and to facilitate economic trade and travel. The whole idea of having commonality with the regulations and the regulatory structure or framework for us to have a common language, basically, that okay, we have the British regulations, we have the US regulations, we have Transport Canada, and we have the Dutch. But Dutch follows EASA. And that is where EASA became a useful tool, because EASA leveled the playing field for all countries of the EU. So technically, Sabre and St. Martin follow the Dutch system, technically, in terms of the applicability. So Winair was offering an essential service, or operates an essential service into Sabre that no other operator can perform. And there's no other aircraft approved to go into Sabre other than Winair with the Twin Otter. There have been other private people who have tried to exercise their franchise as being as a business entity. Any business entity can approach the government and say, well, we want to fly to Sabre as well. And they have not met with any particular success. So I'm going to leave that discussion there. Once Sabre remains, and it will always remain under Dutch, and Winair continue to operate 60 years of incident-free into Sabre, that discussion will remain. Why not Montserrat? Just as an understanding of, we have 1,600 feet, we have 400 feet more than Sabre. We have no obstacles on both ends. Sabre has the same drop off to the sea, and it's a 200-foot cliff in Sabre on both ends of the runway. So the comparison as to why this document came out, it came out in the middle of October or soon thereafter, maybe in the first week in November, and it was propagated on the air that the runway in Montserrat was shortened. And I was alarmed. I was like, well, who shortened the runway? What went wrong? What happened? So that was propagated on ZJB, and that became like the standard bearer of information into Montserrat, or about Montserrat aviation.
All right. So here we are. And it's not a case of we are where we are, because we need to get beyond where we are.
Exactly.
You spoke about all the regulatory, I call it regulatory commonality between, a lot of these countries that use these types of aircraft. Where we are now is a massive ongoing discussion of how to, shall I say, extricate Montserrat from this situation. You were on another program, and you were also part of the suspended, should I call it? I'll need to follow that up, that access inquiry, to find out what the situation is with that. But the
Yeah.
situation as it stands, we've heard from the governor's office, was it last year, put out a tender
January, yes.
for consultancy for what type of aircraft would be best suited to Montserrat, which personally, not an aviation expert like yourself, but as a layman, found it a bit odd when the airport in Montserrat was not only built, but designed specifically for the operation of Twin Otter aircraft. So recently, we've been having these massive discussions about what type of aircraft is best suited to Montserrat. We haven't heard anything from the governor's office pertaining to the outcome of that study. So there seems to be no determinant at the moment as to what type of aircraft is best suited to operate in Montserrat to make the company operating that aircraft commercially viable. Because nobody, unless they're an absolute philanthropist, is going to pump money into a company to operate flights into Montserrat that are not commercially viable. That would also, and I know I'm going on a bit here, but that would also add to the economic development of the island. So a lot of things are just not adding up there, Desmond. Help us to get some clarity.
Okay. ASI introduced a letter on December 13th, 2022, forcing Winair to halt operations. Right? That letter was stated in letter before any further flight. Regulators do not operate that way. I would like to let the general public know. Operators do not operate that way. Regulators do not operate that way unless there's a serious egregence of deregulation or an accident resulting in massive loss. Normally, a regulator would say, let us have a discussion about your operation. Let us get a timeline established to fix whatever anomalies as was stated in the letter. The regulator, as he never came back to the table with a discussion, they became the dictator, let's put it this way. And regulators in aviation are not dictators. We are always operating. I work with the FAA on a daily basis, and I can pick up the phone and call an FAA officer and have a conversation. If they cannot answer my question, they'll say, Mr. Meade, I will get back to you at the end of the week. And by the end of the week, I would have a response to my request. The day after ASI sent that letter, we sent a letter directly to ASI from the UK, and we were told we had no reply. They said, check with the governor's office. ASI is ASI. ASI is not the governor's office. ASI needed to respond to our request. As a stakeholder, we were representing the people of Montserrat in this discussion to find, okay, we have a business opportunity here that is being stifled by your heavy-handed ruling or letter. I can't say it's a ruling. There's no rule that states that a regulator did what they should have done. Their letter was a letter of instruction that we should not fly unless they fix these items.
But Desmond, if I may just butt in here, one can easily say, well, the governor's office would be acting on the guidance, if not the advice, to put it that way, of ASI, which is a British government agency with oversight for Montserrat, which is a British overseas territory.
Agreed. So the governor, so when ASI told us to refer to the governor, they were doing it the wrong way. They needed to respond to us because the governor was not going to reply to us unless ASI gave them something to work with. because ASI and the governor takes all the advice from ASI, because the governor will state, well, I am not an expert, I rely on ASI. So when ASI told our lawyer in the UK, check with the governor's office, that was the wrong answer. That's just plain up and simple, Mike, the wrong answer. They should say, we'll get back to you. We understand your concerns, and we are reaching out to Winier. That they could have said that. We are reaching out to Winier. They could have instructed us that they will reach out to Winier to have a conversation. But this was the week before Christmas, Mike, as we all know, and it was impossible at that time for Winier to respond in an appropriate time to that letter. The letter came in at 3 p.m. in the afternoon. It was already 8 p.m. in the UK. Winier could not normally pick up a phone and make a phone call to someone in the UK on what would be considered to be a non-regulated or non-essential emergency. There was no emergency. And they was, okay, it's just business as normal. Well, you can't respond to this. We can't respond to this letter at 3 o'clock in the afternoon. So that is where we got fully abrupted in our efforts to continue the Twin Otter operations into Montserrat.
Sorry, Desmond, what do you understand of the role, the involvement of the governor's office in all of this? As an organization, what do you understand? Because you're across this, your organization, from, shall I say, on the one hand, there's a commercial aspect, but even more importantly for this discussion, there is a technical aspect, and you folks involved in MACG are aviation experts, pilots, aircraft engineers, that sort of thing, such as yourself. So what do you understand is the role or the involvement of the governor's office in this, particularly as a recent document I got the impression suggested or indicated that the governor's office or the access division or unit or access matters are now primarily under the governor's office, whereas previously we understood them to be under the office of the premier. I'm confused.
Okay, so that instrument that just recently came out from the governor's office is beyond my scope at this time. There are powers that are given to the governor that I cannot, or we as a group cannot amend. It will take government intervention or a government's intervention, or, okay, yes, I guess if we made enough noise about it, we can agitate. So I will state at this moment that the governor did what she had to do based on the political climate that just has transpired over the last 3 months.
Okay, can I ask you, yes, okay, just before you hold that, however, for a moment, can I ask you, have you been in contact with the office of the premier or any responsible minister to do with access to find out exactly, what are the paths to follow in this matter?
I have spoken to Dr. Sammy. I've spoken to Premier, as I've mentioned before, hoping to sit down and have an open and frank discussion about this. Dr. Sammy had at a previous meeting at his office indicated that he would speak to the governor for us to have a sit-down session about this access matter. I have sent out letters to the governor. I have sent out letters to the premier's office to have an official meeting. And I must say that we have not got any response. And this is continuing today in my efforts as recent as a week and a half ago. Sent out another request to the governor. I know she's on vacation, but this matter is beyond just having a vacation. I would like to go on vacation too and relax and enjoy myself. Other members of my group, we all have family matters. We all have emergencies that we have to deal with. But this matter needs to be picked up by the governor, right? And as I was going to state just now, the governor in her role has to interact with ASI. Now, if the governor has not seen it fit to respond to my letter, even by courtesy, I would appreciate that. And give us some, again, give us some rebuttal. Mr. Meade, we are in discussions with other stakeholders, and we'll advise you at a later date. But I want to present on behalf of my learned colleagues. There are 10 of us within this group that are pilots that have over 240 years of experience that we bring into this discussion, right? And we are commercial pilots that fly around the world every day, constantly. We are not sitting behind a desk, collecting a paycheck. We are active in the aviation field, and we have brainstormed this matter in our public chat, and some of our members are very adamant as to the way we want to go. Are we just here to have a conversation? I tell my folks, no, we're not here to have a conversation. We're here to have an outcome, and the outcome is to solve this ASSI issue through a withdrawal of the research restriction. ASSI should be able to do that with a stroke of a pen or with the required guidance to state, okay, yes, the Twin Otter can operate safely with 599 meters. I mean, the tunnel that was added to that runway was because they had to make the runway fit the Twin Otter. As you correctly stated, Mike, the runway was designed for the Twin Otter, and that is why they had to add the tunnel to give us the extra 90 meters to bring the runway out to 599 meters. Why are you now going to go and restrict the same piece of pavement? And that is why the statements put out in the media that the runway was shortened is a misguided statement. It should never have been put out in the public domain, right? So now that we know for a fact, I went on Google Map, I laid out my dimensions, and the runway is 599 meters from end to end. It is fully paved. The government invested $8 million into regrooving the runway after the incident that Fly Montserrat had. $8 million to increase the friction coefficient of the runway. So the runway is not 1 inch shorter than when it was designed. The ASSI restriction to impose the RESA in 2022 should have been done under the guidance of a discussion with Winair, with SVG, right? So that those stakeholders can clearly state, okay, we can do this. Okay, ASSI is going to come up with a discussion or their position. Okay, there are some things that need to be fine-tuned in your operations manual. That is the discussion that should have been held. That is discussion that should have been held, and we would not be having this discussion. The Twin Otters could have continued to operate, right? Winair had a self-imposed load restriction to 16 passengers, specifically so that passengers can have their luggage in Antigua when they got to Antigua or when they came to Montserrat. So the consultancy that the governor put out that has not yielded a result should never have taken place in the first place. You're going to compare a twin-engine aircraft to a single-engine Pilatus aircraft, which is not approved for commercial service under the British ICAO rules. It is not. So the BN2 is not. There's no comparison between the Islander and the Twin Otter, as I stated in the program yesterday.
Now, let me just interject here because you did mention Winair and SVG, and for the purposes of this conversation, it's because, if I'm understanding you correctly, both Winair and SVG operate Twin Otter aircraft as well, in addition to other aircraft they use. The other company you mentioned, Fly Montserrat, they do not use Twin Otters.
No. I mean, Flying
Okay.
Montserrat has stated that they want to operate Twin Otters, but they have never even ventured into discussion to say, well, yes, we have considered it seriously. I don't see I do not see the wherewithal where they are serious about doing Twin Otters, investing into a Twin Otter when they have not done anything for them to improve their maintenance. They have not developed a maintenance hangar in Montserrat. It is expensive to fly an aircraft all the
Okay,
way to Anguilla.
right, Desmond,
Maintenance.
I'm gonna interject on that straight away because, to be honest, discussion is not about, let us say, any particular airline operating in this
Agreed.
case,
Agreed. Yeah.
Fly Monster. But what I
Yeah.
want,
Yeah.
what I want to move on to, I asked the question before, where are we now, and what are the options available for a beneficial outcome, particularly for Montserrat? Is it A, the removal of the RISA restriction, and we go back to where we were with Twin Otter operations back into Montserrat, in and out of Montserrat, fully loaded, however that works? Or we look at reviewing the airport itself, reviewing the runway, realigning it, making it longer. What are the options open to us?
So the easiest and cheapest option is removal of the, and I'm going to use the word removal of the RISA. I'm going to state it this way. The RISA, the 30 meters on either end of the runway that is now in place, it's in the AIP, the published document for the runway in Montserrat. It is
Okay, you're aviation experts. You use a lot of terminology. What's an AIP?
the AIP is the Airport Information Publication.
Okay,
It
gotcha.
has all the specific data that pertains to the for the technical numbers that relate to dimensions, weight, services available at the airport, John A. Airport. All airports prescribe to that.
Gotcha.
And that document comes out of Trinidad. It was updated in November 2021. The RISA is a paved surface at Gerald's Airport. It is not designed or constructed to do the function of a RISA. A RISA, we have heard this discussion many times on the air by various persons that the RISA is designed to retard the aircraft if it has overrun the runway. It means it did not have enough distance to start.
Okay, I'm
And it,
interjecting again, Desmond,
yeah.
because for this type of information, I myself need to make sure that I'm following it. So I'm going to go back to the beginning. So if you are
Mhm.
saying that the airport, although it was designed with a Twin Otter in mind, did not necessarily need to have a RISA, am I understanding you correctly?
In 2005, no,
So
that's correct.
then, right.
In 2016,
Was that an oversight? Are there other
no,
airports
no,
in this
no. There
region
was
that
no
do not have a
regulation.
RISA?
There was no regulation to have a RISA in 2005.
Okay.
Right? 2013, ICAO introduced the idea of the RISA, development of RISA, to provide it increased safety, operational safety, in case an aircraft deviates. As much as we don't like to talk about it, incidents happen. Aircraft run off the end of the runways, and the RISA was designed so that there are no obstructions in the way. The terrain is soft so that the aircraft will basically slow itself down. Now, just remember, aircraft is already decelerating when it gets to the end of the runway. Hopefully, things can go terribly wrong. We know that. We've seen movies where aircraft are hurtling down the runway. This is not the case. We are in a controlled environment. The pilot has overshot for some reason. He misjudged his landing, and he overruns the end of the runway. He goes through those lights that we see at the end of the runway. Gerald's does not have any overrun capability. The 30 meters that had now been introduced after 2016, they were implemented as law by ASTI, because ASTI abided by the ruling that if any publication is put out by ICAO, they are going to enact it as law in the associated territory. So all territories under ASI's guidelines, Anguilla had to introduce a RISA. Tortola had to introduce a RISA, right? But in the case of Anguilla, the airport, the operator is allowed to use the RISA in his calculations. And that is 150 meters in the case of Anguilla. All we are asking for in Montserrat is 30 meters, Mike, 30 meters. Why are we not allowed to use that calculation when in Anguilla it is allowed to be used?
Well, there's a precedent there. And the
There
other
is the
thing,
precedent. Exactly.
and the other thing I'm going to throw into the mix at the quote unquote business end, and I really mean the business end here, if I have a facility and the facility was built to specifications as directed, and later on there are adjustments which inhibit or which render my facility unworkable or practically unsuitable for operations, isn't it the responsibility of whomever it is that would have brought in the new regulations or the new restrictions to either A, assist me in upgrading my facility so that it meets or ascribes to the new regulations, or alternatively pay the money to ensure that my facility meets the new specifications.
Very good point. Very good point, Mike. And there's so many different precedents that apply to this, not only in aviation but in common street life. If the government is going to dig up in front of your home, he has to put up a notice. If he cannot, if your entrance to your driveway has to be blocked, he has to provide a way of ensuring that your access to your property is maintained. In the case of businesses, businesses get compensated for loss of use of business. COVID provided loss of revenue funding to public citizens in Montserrat. I can't remember the exact number, right? But that is the case of this. If you're going to restrict my runway operating length, then you need to compensate my seating.
So
You
then
need to
who
provide.
makes that case in the case of Montserrat? Is it MACG, or is it the government of Montserrat, or is it MACG and the government of Montserrat? Because this certainly affects Montserrat and has implications for Montserrat's economic development, because I'm reading through all of this that access into Montserrat, passenger flow, the opportunities for economic growth into Montserrat are being hampered by this. So there ought to be some sort of compensation or claim for compensation.
Claim for compensation and or straight up subsidy. Straight up subsidy. Because if the aircraft was designed, if the airport is designed for the Twin Otter, I am losing 6 seats. So you should be compensating any operator coming into Montserrat with the Twin Otter with a straight up subsidy. You can't come in with full load. We will pay this. That is what should be. That is what should happen.
Right.
MACG
So
can
that is
join
what
that conversation. Winia can join the conversation. SVG can join the conversation. You
So that
know.
is what should happen. But to be honest
Yes.
with you, Desmond,
Yes.
that's not been happening. We've been having this discussion for going ever since this issue came up, the discussion back and forth, back and forth. A lot of us average people are now as knowledgeable about the RISA situation as we are now about pyroclastic flows. Okay?
Exactly. I like
Good.
that analogy. Yes. Yes.
So
Yes.
who takes it forward from here? Because We're just like a dog chasing its tail. We're just going around in circles and nothing is happening. Nothing is moving. So it's either fix the airport, make a case to have the airport fixed, or remove the RISA. Who
And
takes it forward, even
technically,
legally?
yeah, technically, Mike, the RISA can remain in place. All ASI has to do is instruct or make it an amendment in the operating manual that the 599 meters can be used. And that is the exact specific request that Winnie has told me. Desmond, get ASI to remove the net to give us back the 599 meters. That is a four paragraph letter to fix that. Four paragraphs maximum in a letter, and that would give us back the 599 meters. That is
So,
all we need.
so to wrap up, Desmond, what happens next? How do we move this forward? Who moves it forward? Because somebody
So,
needs to.
okay, so one of the key components of this is the business incentive to move towards having how should I say, the economic, beyond the economic necessity, but looking at the operation into and out of Montserrat using Twin Otter aircraft. That is the way we have to go. We can look at other derivatives of new aircraft that are in the mix. The Technam that has been talked about. The Technam is just a faster upgraded Islander. It does not have the seating capacity. You still have to do double the number of flights in order to make one trip of a Twin Otter. So you are doubling the cost. They always say the Twin Otter is more expensive to operate, but the Twin Otter will do it in one trip. Whereas the Technam or the Islander will probably have to do it in 3 trips, depending on the wind conditions. But the Twin Otter will always give you 16, at a minimum, 16 passengers in and out of Montserrat. So as a group, we are moving towards that in the development of the MACG mission, is to work towards a business solution to having Twin Otters operate daily into Montserrat. If there have to be restrictions, Mike, we will make sure that they're self-imposed, right? If we don't want, if we're going to come head to head with ASI, we will have to take it to a higher level, and this will go beyond the scope of this discussion, because this should not be happening. We should not be, as I said, going around in circles talking about the same thing. I'm hoping next week that I can have a different discussion with you as to having a Twin Otter in Montserrat for November 1st. And that is what we're working towards right now.
All right,
Having
Desmond.
a Twin Otter available for November 1st.
Okay, we look forward to that. Look forward to talking with you some more about this. Look forward to looking forward. I think even with the access inquiry, they'll forgive me that I do not have the exact remit here before me, but I'm just feeling that we're spending a lot of time looking backwards. We know all the problems. We know how we got to where we are. We now
Agreed.
need to have a determination to move beyond this in the interest of Montserrat. Thank you very much for taking the time, Desmond, and all the best to you and Montserrat Access Group, MACG. Thank you.
Yes, on behalf of all the members, thank you very much, Mike, for this opportunity, and hope to see you soon in the near future.